Welcome to the news in Africa and the world. We open today's edition in Togo, where President Faure Gnassingbe has named the first female Prime Minister, Victoire Tomega-Dogbe. The appointment came after the resignation of the former Prime Minister, Komi Selum Klasu, and his government. The 60-year-old woman had several ministerial positions since 2008, including recently that of Development Minister and also Chief of Staff of the President's Office. Togo had been due for a government reshuffle since Gnassingbe was re-elected in February for a fourth term in office, but the changes were delayed by the coronavirus pandemic. Ahead of the February election, a fractured opposition struggled to launch a concerted campaign to unseat Gnassingbe, despite widespread dissatisfaction with his leadership of the small West African country of 8 million people. Tomega-Dogbe was the Minister of Grassroots Development, Handicraft, Youth and Youth Employment in the Komi Selum Klasu government and Cabinet Director of President Faure Gnassingbe. In Zimbabwe, children have returned to the classrooms for the first time in 6 months since the coronavirus outbreak, but teachers are nowhere to be seen as two unions went on strike on Monday in a dispute over pay, working conditions, and COVID-19 protective equipment. The government shut schools in March to prevent the spread of the pandemic, which has infected over 7,600 people and led to 225 deaths in Zimbabwe. As students prepare to sit their final exams, many schools have reopened this week, though the teachers are not present to teach the students. According to the Secretary General of one of the country's largest unions, Raymond Majongwe, teachers battle to survive and that they can't even afford to send their own children to school. He added teacher salaries have been heavily eroded by inflation, which stands at over 700% to an average equivalent of $40 a month, down from $550 in October 2018. $40 is an insult. Teachers have lost their ranking in society. It is actually an insult to be a teacher. It is a curse, he said. Zimbabwe is being battered by its worst economic crisis in over a decade and is tussling with hyperinflation. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has announced that bars could reopen and restaurants could sell alcohol again as the rate of new coronavirus infections slowly declines in the country. In a nationwide address, Kenyatta announced the easing of several strict measures imposed to contain the spread of COVID-19, but stopped short of reopening classrooms after the 2020 school year was abandoned. Following a coronavirus summit in Nairobi with government officials, the president ordered that a nationwide dusk to dawn curfew would be extended by another 60 days but pushed back the hour it begins from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. The number of attendees allowed the weddings. Take two, the number of attendees allowed in weddings and funerals was doubled to 200, and the permitted size of gatherings at houses of worship increased to 1/3 of their normal seated capacity. The number of daily coronavirus infections has declined since the summer's peak, but Kenyatta has warned a second wave is still very possible and threatened of reimposing measures if cases rose again. Still in Africa, a United Nations study has showed Africa has lost nearly $89 billion a year in illicit financial flows such as tax evasion and theft, amounting to more than it receives in development aid. The estimate in the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development's a 248-page report shows an increase in trend and is higher than the most previous estimates. The economists say the scale and scope of illicit capital flight, which is equivalent to 3.7% of Africa's gross domestic product, and the economic consequences of COVID-19 threaten to reverse gains made in health, education, and other areas. Nearly half of the total annual figure of $88.6 billion is accounted for by the export of commodities such as gold, diamonds, and platinum, the report said. The UN agency has said cracking down on such illegal outflows could help African countries retain capital for investment in roads, railways, schools, and healthcare. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development said African countries generally are not doing enough to reform the international tax system in ways that could help, and said local judicial authorities often lack proper tools to combat tax evasion. Moving out of the African continent, French President Emmanuel Macron will meet Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya in Lithuania this Tuesday, the Élysée Palace said in a statement. Tikhanovskaya has requested Macron act as a mediator in the ongoing crisis in Belarus, saying he could involve Russia in opening a dialogue. Comes as part of a 3-day visit to Lithuania, which also saw him meet with Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda late Monday. During their meeting, the two leaders agreed that the European Union should decide on sanctions against Belarus at the summit of the bloc's leaders later this week. The French president will be with Tikhanovskaya's most high-profile meeting so far since the disputed election and the weeks of unprecedented mass protests that she has helped inspire. And in Mexico, women have invaded the streets in protest demanding the legalization of abortion in the majority Roman Catholic country. The protesters, wearing green bandanas, gathered in Mexico's capital to mark the International Safe Abortion Day, which is celebrated each year on September 28. Police, many of them female officers, responded by spraying plumes of tear gas at the women, some of whom wielded hammers and threw bottles and paint. Abortion is illegal in Mexico outside the capital city and the southern state of Oaxaca, which legalized the medical procedure last year. In the rest of Mexico, abortion is banned except under certain circumstances such as rape. The abortion law has been receiving renewed attention after the death of the Supreme Court of Justice of the United States, pioneering women's rights advocate, which has cast doubt over the future of legal abortion in the country. That was it for today's edition. Thank you very much for your kind and keen attention. Until we meet again, do take care and stay safe.